Greetings and welcome to today's Sustainable Materials Management webinar entitled From Pen and Paper to Artificial Technology. 21st Century Methods for Measuring Excess Food. I'm Specialist Villaseñor, serving as your moderator. Chris of EPA Region 5 is sitting behind the technology controls of our webinar. He'll read us any questions you send in. Thank you, Chris. This webinar is brought to you by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, whose mission is to protect human health and the environment, including the prevention of excess food. You'll hear from 6 speakers about their organization's excess food measurement methods. By now, you should have the GoToWebinar application running and be able to see the presentation on your screen. The speaker slides are attached to this webinar control panel on the screen for you to download. Please use the GoToWebinar control panel to type your questions in the area that says Questions. Click Send to submit it to us. Our esteemed speakers are Mr. Max Maliner, Director of Operations at Food, Mr. Jay Kahn, Director of Facilities Operations at Central Michigan University, Mr. Douglas Bradley, Vice President of Culinary Excellence Everyday at Savor Chicago, Ms. Gina Sears, Business Development Executive at Winnow, Ms. Laura Smith, Past Program and Grants Coordinator and current contractor for the Boulder Valley School District, and me, Mr. Andre Villaseñor, Sustainable Management of Food Coordinator at EPA Region 9's Southern California Field Office. For speaker bios, visit the SMM Web Academy website at epa.gov/SMM. Please note the disclaimer and remember to type your questions throughout the webinar. Now I'll give you an intro. Food is the single largest type of material going for disposal in the U.S. About 1/3 of our food goes uneaten each year. At the retail and consumer levels, the value of food loss and excess in the U.S. is estimated at over $161 billion annually. Meanwhile, almost 1 in 8 U.S. inhabitants is food insecure. If we recover 15% of our excess food, we can feed 25 million people. In 2015, EPA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture declared a national goal to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by the year 2030. Then last year, EPA, FDA, and USDA signed an agreement, the Winning on Reducing Food Waste Initiative, to improve national coordination on the sustainable management of food. In April of this year, the President proclaimed Winning on Reducing Food Waste Month. There's a strong business case for winning on reducing food waste. Champions 12.3 published a report called The Business Case for Reducing Food Loss and Waste. It shows that for every $1 you invest in food waste prevention strategies, like excess food measurement, you earn $14 in savings from less waste hauling and smaller food purchases. The not-for-profit ReFed estimates a $1.9 billion annual business profit potential from 11 food waste solutions, including excess food tracking and analytics, whose profit potential is valued at over $1 billion. Waste tracking and analytics means daily measuring your facility's excess food, because then you can manage what you measure. To begin measurement, start out with a pen and paper or EPA's paper tracking food waste log to write down the food getting wasted, the quantity, and the reasons for excess. Next, plug your handwritten data into EPA's free Food and Packaging Waste Prevention tool so you can view data-generated graphs and summaries that identify patterns of your excess food generation. The Commission for Environmental Cooperation, supported by EPA and its Canadian and Mexican counterparts, recently published Why and How to Measure Food Loss and Waste. The guide consists of sector-specific, step-by-step plans for how companies and governments can customize their measurement methods and track causes of wasted food. Here's an example of why measurement is important. In 2017, EPA Region 9 performed a student-led excess food measurement assessment during lunchtime. We used buckets to collect students' plate leftovers, scales to weigh it, and pen and paper to record the numbers, subsequently plugging the data into an Excel spreadsheet. By the end of the 1-hour lunch, we had collected 103 pounds of brown rice from students' plates. Their primary reason for leaving the rice uneaten were that it was too bland and dry. Using this information, a kitchen can increase consumption by cooking the rice with more water, adding condiments, and serving smaller portions, thereby saving money on food purchasing and disposal. The USDA EPA University of Arkansas Guide to Conducting Student Food Waste Audits explains how to survey students on the reasons for leftover food on their plates, as well as collecting, separating, and weighing leftover food. It's downloadable from our Sustainable Management of Food website. Do you like to track your achievements and get recognized for them? In EPA's Food Recovery Challenge, known as the FRC, organizations measure their sustainable management of food practices and report the results annually. FRC participants track and reduce their surplus food. FRC endorsers educate other organizations about the sustainable management of food and the Food Recovery Challenge. FRC participants and endorsers get an account to the SMM data management system. This is the form that participants use to annually report and track their food waste prevention, food donation, food recycling, and food landfilled, thus revealing their food waste diversion rate. After entering their annual food waste reduction data, FRC participants can view their annual climate profile. In this example, as a result of their surplus food donation, this organization's greenhouse gases prevented is like that of removing over 1,800 cars from the road. Organizations that take the Food Recovery Challenge enjoy a password-protected account for tracking and reporting their excess food reduction, assistance with EPA's excess food measurement tools and reporting database, sustainable management of food webinars like the one you're viewing now, and eligibility to be in the running for national or regional recognition. Does this sound exciting? Who's on board? To join, go to epa.gov/food recovery challenge. In 2017, over 1,000 FRC participants and endorsers prevented over 18,000 tons of excess food, saved over $37 million in avoided tipping fees from landfills, and reduced the greenhouse gas emissions equivalent of 96,000 cars from the road. In conclusion, cut your excess food in half by 2030 and strengthen your budget by doing the following. Measure your excess food, then source reduce. Leverage the food recovery hierarchy to optimize your food purchasing and consumption, and join EPA's Food Recovery Challenge so you can track your progress and get recognized for your achievements. For details on what you've learned, visit EPA's Sustainable Management of Food website or contact us. Chris, what questions, if any, have come in during the course of my presentation?
Thank you, Andre. We have had one or two general questions come in. First off is, will this presentation be posted after the webinar? We do have a handout section right now with our other presenters' webinars, presentations, but we were not able to post Andre's because of space restrictions there. So will yours be posted as well on the SMM webinar website, Andre?
We can certainly post it on the webinar website, and since this presentation is being recorded, this entire webinar is being recorded, it'll be available on the recorded webinar as well.
Okay, thank you. Two other questions. Has FRC replaced the Food Too Good to Waste program?
Those are actually two different programs. The Food Recovery Challenge is for organizations that want to track and measure their food waste reduction. Food Too Good to Waste is a home-based tool. It's for people in their homes that want to track and measure their excess food, and that tool is available on the EPA Sustainable Management of Food website.
Okay, thank you. And one final question, a little bit larger question here, but what food waste measures are in place in airports?
It really depends on the airports, and it depends on where they're located. In some states like California, for example, depending on the amount of food waste they're generating, most commercial operations are now required to divert their food waste, and therefore that would include measuring their food waste. So just one example, the San Diego airport is actively engaged in donating their surplus food and sending their food scraps to compost.
Okay, well, I think that is all we have time for right now. Why don't we go ahead and you may resume.
Yeah, so now we're going to dig into 21st century methods for measuring excess food. And as Chris transitions over to the next presentation, we're going to start with Max Maliner of Food, which joined the Food Recovery Challenge as an endorser this year.
All right, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Before I begin, I would like to thank the team over at the EPA for coordinating this event and providing that great overview of the issue of food waste that we'll be discussing today, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other solutions are out there as well. So, my name is Max Maliner, and I am the Director of Operations for Food. We are a food waste prevention platform that uses computer vision and artificial intelligence to help food businesses of all sizes cut their food waste in half. 1/3. So this was what was mentioned in the introduction. Currently 1/3 of the food produced in the United States goes uneaten, which approximates to around $161 billion spent growing, processing, transporting, and then disposing of food that will never be eaten. For people that have not heard these statistics before, the natural follow-up question is, where is this waste happening? Well, the answer in general is not at the farm or the industrial processing stages, but actually consumer-facing food businesses as well as consumers at home. Together, they are responsible for nearly 85% of the food that ends up in landfills. At Food, we are focused on helping those food businesses reduce their waste. So what does food businesses consist of? Well, for us at Food, that would include higher education, hospitality and lodging, healthcare, corporate cafeterias, restaurants, fast food, and grocery stores. When developing our solution, we did it with the EPA's food recovery hierarchy in mind and aimed for maximum impact, source reduction. By using our system and its findings, decision makers are provided actionable insights on how to make purchasing reductions to dramatically reduce their waste from ever occurring. And now, how does our process work? Well, first we implement our smart scale into kitchens to track waste using computer vision and artificial intelligence. Next, we collect that data and display it to our web dashboard, which showcases trends and reports for users. And ultimately, we leverage those findings to help businesses make reductions by empowering more educated purchasing decisions. Food currently has two models. The first is our floor model, the Food XL. It's a low-profile scale and tablet camera integration. Operators simply compost or throw away food as they normally would. We identify the item as well as the quantity, and that's it. Zero staff training or manual entry required. Next is our Food X. This is our tabletop model. This is for prepared foods not being composted. Operators simply place items on the device to track waste in seconds. This one is typically used in back-of-house operations for cafeterias and hot bars, where pans of prepared foods are being disposed of after not being eaten by consumers. All of that data is seamlessly collected to our dashboard. We integrate with existing food service management software and point-of-sale tools to know exactly what the total loss of food is, what your top wasted items are, but most importantly, provide insights on where you can make reductions to save money and reduce waste. For example, if a new customer is operating on food system and we see that they are consistently throwing out 20 pounds of baked chicken thighs every Tuesday and Thursday, by recognizing that and making the simple adjustment to their inventory purchasing, they can avoid 160 pounds of wasted chicken the following month. I like to refer to these immediate insights as the low-hanging fruit. Now, once we've exhausted the insights on low-hanging fruit, of which there is normally a lot, we then provide sustained value through more advanced data analysis. Now, this can consist of many things. Mainly, it's forecasting models where a user can input what their purchasing proposal is for the following month, and we'll give feedback on what the resulting waste likely will be. Another form of data analysis is looking into how specific item combinations, when served alongside one another, produce varying levels of waste. Now, if we use that chicken waste example, and if we look into the chicken waste and its relation to other items, we may see that when a chicken dish is served alongside both steak and fish on a particular day, that waste total might far outpace what we would normally expect for that dish. And when you have that finding, the user can then adjust their menu accordingly to not overserve protein. Now let's look at what the solution is for an actual user. This is what the process was for a user that we recently onboarded. That was their existing waste process, which took nearly 90 seconds on average to register one item. We've sped the video up 4 times. And this is what the process was for their average of 150 items wasted from their hot bar alone. And now we can look at what the process is with our solution, which automates the entire thing. That labor reduction and ease of use is how we see incredible staff buy-in. If the process is too cumbersome, people won't use the device because the inconvenience is not worth it. But with our system, it's a quick interaction and they can carry on in their workflow. Another added feature is our Food EDU display, which uses formulas actually taken from the EPA's food waste calculator to contextualize food waste for consumers in public spaces. Now, this feature is particularly popular with our higher ed accounts who are motivated to educate their students as much as they are motivated to save money on their dining operations. And we offer a wide variety of formulas and display graphics to provide new perspectives on food waste that we hope consumers, after looking at a screen in a public space for 30 to 60 seconds, they intake that information, and then they carry it along and hopefully adjust their own weekly food purchasing and food habits. Now, getting back to the benefits for food businesses, it's through the insights that we provide that one of our average users will prevent more than 30 tons of greenhouse gases from entering the environment in their first year of use. We also see labor reductions, which I was talking about earlier. 90% compared to manual tracking leads into staff buy-in, which leads into higher quantities of waste tracked. And finally, cost savings. An average customer sees 8 to 10% savings on their annual food budget in the first year. And that is why waste tracking and analytics and the savings that come from educated purchasing decisions to reduce waste is why it's the highest profit potential for businesses, as well as the most impactful type of solution for keeping food out of landfills. At Food, we believe we found the solution to tackle food waste at every scale, helping food businesses of all sizes save time, money, and better protect the planet. And now I'll be happy to take any questions from the audience on what I've just presented.
Okay, great. Thank you. We had one or two questions come in. In terms of the setup, how is the food system trained, and how do you need to go through and get a tare weight on every container that may be used, or is there an average tare weight that you use for each type of container? How do some of the details like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So currently when we onboard a new customer, we'll receive their new menu, but then we also receive a sheet that gives what their tare weights are for individual pans, and we can train the device to recognize which pan is being used and auto tare it from the system.
Okay, and then in terms of training, is it just presenting an image or a tray and then initially telling the system what that is so that it learns?
Yeah, so rather than selecting an item from every item that can be available, once we integrate with a menu, we can limit the scope of what the recognition software is to, say, a subset of 150 items, which improves both the accuracy and the speed.
Okay. So we have had a few questions about cost come in as well, and I think it's a little out of the scope of the webinar to discuss cost at this point. That would be something that each person would want to contact Food with directly. What is the installation process like? Is that as simple as putting just putting the scale on and the system and then plugging it in?
Yeah, so that's something in particular that we pride ourselves on is the ease of installation. As long as we're sent a menu and the pan weight list beforehand, we simply go on site, plug it in, connect to the Wi-Fi, and then it's such an intuitive process that we generally train with whoever a station lead or a store lead is for a particular site, and then they can train the people below them. It only takes 1 or 2 interactions before people pick up how to use the system, and the staff buys in very quickly. So it's very limited training and very limited installation time, and people are up and running very quickly.
Okay, thank you. And let's see. So as you mentioned, we've had a few questions about where these systems can be used. They're been used in schools of all levels or just universities?
Mostly higher ed institutions concentrating on universities, but we're also active in some senior centers. We're active in some private 9 through 12 schools. But yeah, in general, we're focused on higher ed institutions, but it can be implemented pretty much anywhere.
Okay. Thank you. There were a few other questions, but I don't think we'll be able to get to those right now due to time. So back to you, Andre.
Thank you very much, Max, for that informative presentation. We'll go on to our next speaker, Jay Kahn of Central Michigan University, which has been a Food Recovery Challenge participant since 2013. Please keep your questions coming by entering them into the questions portion of the GoToWebinar control panel. Welcome, Jay.
Hello, everybody. Can you see my screen? Am I maximized? So, hello, my name is Jay Kahn. I'm Director of Facility Operations at Central Michigan University. The first slide is showing our couple of my grad students back in March of 2010. It was the students' idea to start a composting program at the university, and how we did that is starting by collecting pre-consumer back of the house food waste in 5-gallon pickle buckets, and starting our own windrow back behind the baseball stadium. So how do I do the next slide?
You'll probably just need to scroll down, it looks like.
There you
go. Okay, and then so our food service provider is Airmark. They're a EPA 2030 champion, and this is one of their internal processes back in 2010, and they had a internal process called Weigh the Waste, and that's where the kitchen workers would collect their individual production waste and then have a conversation with their manager about it, and record that waste and try to figure out how to reduce it. This is a pallet scale that we have, and this is predominantly what we use to do food waste audits, which we do about 4 times a year. It's a portable scale, and this is, we put it in the back of a pickup truck, and this is us doing some food waste, or some waste audits at K-12, a local elementary school, in a grant that we have last year. And this is our truck scale that we have by our power plant, and this is predominantly to weigh our landfill weights, and our waste hauler is Waste Management, and they weigh out every day.
Max, would you be able to zoom out a little bit by pushing the negative button there? We are not seeing the entire slide on the webinar.
Actually, if you press on the little symbol above the plus sign, that should give you full screen.
Okay.
Right above the plus sign.
How's that?
And then do it again one more time.
Okay.
And then that makes it a little bigger.
Yeah, we are losing the bottom of the slide here. Try F11.
How's that? Do you guys want me to just go to a PowerPoint presentation? This is the kind of the presentation that I clicked onto. Sorry. So yeah, this is our pallet scales, and or excuse me, this is our truck dock scales, and this is one of the charts, one of the Excel charts that we've made that back in 2010 to kind of track our overall weights. Can you guys see the whole chart?
No, why don't you push that button over the plus one more time, or that.
How's that?
Sorry, the one button just above it.
How's that?
See the whole thing. Thank you.
That's better.
Okay, great. So this is just a simple Excel chart that we made back in 2010, and it captures our whole municipal solid waste picture. Each bar each column represents an entire year. The brown bars are our landfill weights, and the blue bars are our recycling weights. And back in 2010, we started a composting program, and throughout the whole year of 2010, we were able to compost with those pickle buckets 16 tons. And so the total diversion through the university, through those weighing methods, 24% from landfill. So 2 years later, the student pilot program, we were collecting pre-consumer waste 44 tons a year, and landfill starts going down a little bit, and our charting got a little bit more sophisticated. We broke out cardboard, compost, recycling, and landfill. And then in 2013, we started collecting pre-consumer, or post-consumer waste, plate scrapings, and hired a rendering company basically to haul all our food waste to a local composter. And our hauler was Future Organics, and our composter was Morgan's Composting in mid-Michigan. So you can see when we started, we were at about 24% diversion in our back of the house composting program, and when we added the two together, both pre and post consumer, we jumped up to 31% diversion, and all of a sudden we went from about 40 to 70 tons in a student-based program to around 250 tons per year, and a 31% diversion. So pretty dramatic difference. This is our composter, Morgan's Composting, where we send our food wastes. And they sell their product throughout Michigan, mostly to farms, and they'll make a custom compost based on a soil profile. And to give you an idea of what their size is, their diesel fuel bill is about $2 million a year, so it's a big operation. They have a small retail store on site where they will sell some retail compost, a very small part of their business. That product is called Dairy Dew, and you can buy it through selected nurseries throughout Michigan. So our hauler, Future Organics, stopped hauling food waste for us. And so we lost our hauler and started figuring out how either we were going to become our own hauler or we were going to hire somebody else. And so we had to take a year off of our compost program and put things back in the landfill, which was unfortunate. But we figured one of our ideas was to hook that cart dumper up onto a truck and become our own hauler. Eventually, we put that cart dumper on the back of a dump trailer, or on the side of a dump trailer, and this is us hauling our own waste to Morgan's Composting. That dump trailer will, we do 3 trips a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and fully loaded, that dump trailer holds about 8,000 pounds. So our current diversion, our diversion back in 2016 is 33%, and being our own hauler, we're around 320 tons that year of food waste. In 2018, 39%, and we're looking at about 330 tons. That's pretty much where we leveled off. We run 4 zero-waste commercial kitchens and 1 zero-waste catering facility. And this is our current diversion. So you can see from 10 years ago, the charting hasn't changed a whole lot. It's just gotten better. But we still use Excel spreadsheets and use paper and pencil and record our weights. I'd like to thank our business partners, Airmark and EPA 2030 Champion, Morgan's Composting, Future Organics, and the cost of our program is a little bit less than $50 a ton to send food waste to Morgan's Composting, and that number includes the employee wages, benefits, gas, equipment, compostable bags, which we have to use for our kitchen staff, and the same ton hauled to the landfill, $93. Any questions?
Yes, we've had one or two. Did the hauler quit collecting the compost due to contamination, or was it for another reason?
Well, it's great question. So that hauler had the Walmart contract, and the Walmart contract was a nationwide contract to go to all the Walmarts and take all their food that didn't sell, and that contractor, Future Organics, didn't mind taking that food waste and composting it. Well, they lost the Walmart contract, and the people who got it, which was a sister company of theirs called Organics, they were interested in taking that food waste and selling it to piggeries. And as we all know, we can't put our post-consumer plate scraping waste and contaminate their pretty pure food waste stream, and that can't be sold to piggeries. So that's why they had to get out of the business, or we had to find a new hauler.
Okay. Is there a food recovery? Is there any kind of food recovery for edible food in operation? If so, what are those metrics like?
So our source reduction is really just the back of the house effort. For front of the house reduction, we have kind of an all you care to eat philosophy. We're trayless, and the management at Airmark is just fantastic at understanding their customer and being able to slow down production as the meal is ending, so they end up with very little waste on the production side. So the plate scrapings are right off of people's plates. They're not really from the buffet line that the students go to pick up their food.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Jay. That was wonderful. Let's turn to Douglas Bradley of Savor Chicago at McCormick Place, which joined the Food Recovery Challenge as a participant in 2013 and earned a regional FRC award in 2018. Welcome, Douglas.
Glad to be here. Let me get the slides ponied up. Everybody see the screen?
Yes.
I'll assume that's a yes. So actually, yeah, we're delighted to be part of the EPA challenge. We have actually
we see the presenter view. If you could flip screens, that right between the search glass and the three dots, I think is what we need. Go to slideshow instead of view.
Better?
Okay, at the bottom of the slide, there is the monitor stand. Go up from there. Right
Yep.
there. No, 1 minute. Not that one.
Apologies.
I think it's got your monitors.
How's that?
Right. There we go. Perfect.
Excellent. So we've actually been fortunate enough to have garnered 5 different EPA Food Challenge awards over the years, starting in about 2014. But what I'd like to do is talk about a number of different pieces, really about how we got where we are, as well as how our measurement process has changed over time here. So just a brief look here. I want to talk a little bit about why we do what we do, talk about some of the things we've learned along that path, and then as well zero in a little bit more specifically on McCormick Place and what our programs are here, and how we communicate that off through our recording and reporting. So at the basis, essentially, we're a restaurant company, and as a restaurant company, we really look at the origin of the word restaurateur, that basically it comes from a store, and we want to make sure that the way we operate ties back not only to how we prepare the food, but then how we integrate with the communities as well as the environment that we're in. And I think that this story really tells a story about, or these slides really tell the story about not just what the reporting finally is, but also how do we get here, and hopefully that there's some benefit to everybody on the presentation today that they can take away in terms of how they can apply that to their accounts. We've always focused on high volume relative to how our programs work. And a lot of what we've learned here comes from things we learned over when our different managers had worked in the various summer games relative to the Olympics. And there's always been a sort of a focus with them relative to minimizing waste contribution out of the games. And a number of these slides are actually from the 2012 games where we focused on not only feeding the athletes, but also how we could make the athlete village dining areas zero waste reduction areas. So we worked primarily with 3 streams, the compostable, recyclable, and general. You'll see that we also put in a liquid dump, because one of the things we found is that with the post-consumer weight, we are having issues with the amount of liquid that would come from post-consumer. The other thing you may notice in here is the cutlery piece, so that a decision was made that we would actually use flatware, metal flatware, so that it was washed and reused instead of using compostable weight, which again helped reduction relative to the amount of waste that was generated. Other things out of that games that we learned is that one of the things that you'll hear, this is a recurring theme through this, is a lot of our attendees, wherever the venue is, they want to do the right thing, but they don't know what to put where. So when we put on just even a color-coded can, like you'll see in the bottom right-hand side there, with signage up that basically says what goes in there, it's hard for a consumer coming up with a limited amount of time to really understand what goes where. So the first piece we did was we actually, and this was started working in the employee dining areas, and we actually taped, as you see there, taped representation right on the top in terms of what would go into what container. That's a general waste there. And then As we developed that program out, we got more specific signage. And again, you'll see that showing up later in the presentation as well, as we've carried that idea forward because we found it to be so effective in terms of making sure that there was minimization of contamination. This again, similar to what Michigan has been doing, is we started with handwritten sheets. We actually we had found that there really was minimal records in terms of exactly how much waste had been coming out of the games. So what we put in place here was with a fairly small investment, we put an additional manager and 2 hourly workers, and in total started to weigh everything that came out of the back of the dining halls and keeping track of it and entering it into those 3 main categories, as well as an additional reusable category for items like pallets and bread racks and things like that that were then reused as opposed to recycled, composted, or put into the general waste. So this is absolutely old school, pen and paper, and you could always tell if the sheets were authentic or not because there'd be a little bit of waste on the sheets because they're right out next to the can disposal areas. Kind of fast forwarding to where we are in a more current place, just to give an idea of what the operation is and what we're dealing with when we take on diverting waste here. We do about $46 million in food, total of 4 halls and 1 arena, 10,000 seat arena. There's 3 main kitchens. We have a new commissary kitchen in there, and we're relatively state of the art in terms of what kind of food we can produce here. You can see this is the evolution of that signage understanding that we got out of the games. It's the hardest piece that we had found to deal with, is that if you're looking at the back of the house in those areas, I won't say it's easy, but it's a more manageable process to inform your staff, and they usually want to do the right thing, and to have the different segregation of what the waste is something that can be managed by your in-house team. When you're talking about what's going on out in the dining room, particularly in event-driven business, many times the people aren't there on a regular basis. They don't understand what the can system is. So to have specific cans that give examples of exactly what the waste is that they are likely to have on their trays or in their hands, and let them know precisely which container to put it into, has really helped us change that participation rate from the front of the house teams. One thing you'll notice on here, this is a little bit of a dated piece down in the landfill area. At that time, the Starbucks cups were not compostable. They are now, so we're looking at changing this signage. But again, this is a relatively flexible program. It's because we printed the signs in-house. It's easy to go ahead and make a change if something changes, or if the food items that are being served at a given function changes, then we can easily make that adjustment. Another thing we did is we actually looked at our busing program and put in place a Green Angels program. So we do have a sorting process where when customers come up, they just drop the tray. We go ahead and sort what the products are and manage what streams they go into. Those are in our brick and mortar locations. The sign that I showed before is really more applicable to our portable areas. In terms of how we've evolved, this is a little bit of shows a little bit of the impact. We had a little hiccup back in 2014, but you can see we've moved quite a ways from when we first came in here, the first year that we operated this contract in 2011, up to where we are now in terms of 2017 has been a good journey and had a pretty good impact on what our diversion rates were. This gives a little more detailed piece. Again, we're using Excel, similar to what I heard from Michigan, so that we're tracking what items are here. I did hear one of the questions in terms of what do we do in terms of donating food, and I can pull those numbers up. They're not in this particular report, but I can add that in, and I can give an update on what that is before the end of the call if folks are interested. So let me know. The other piece I wanted to just kind of point out here, you'll see that the total diversion here, we're just a hair away from 90%. And one of the pieces that we really continue to work with depends on what the show is that comes in here and what their focus is on reducing waste, diverting waste when they come in. And many of the shows have different approaches. Most of them at this point are concerned one way or the other. The Greenbuild had actually come in. They were intent on having the lowest amount of waste that they could. And they're very effective. I mean, there is no plastic bottles out there relative to consumer plastic bottles. There's just a massive effort on their part in terms of helping with, putting folks out buy cans to help people understand, volunteers that went out and worked to buy the cans to help consumers understand where to put what. That's a great plus when you can get that. And then also looking at what the menu items were and being flexible relative to if you ran out of a roast beef item, or if you ran out of a chicken item, a bean burrito, whatever it was, that as long as there's other entrees available, if there's other food available, that wasn't the end of the world. And I think that's another piece, is how do you change the customer's expectation if they're coming up to a buffet area. You generate more waste if you're going to have a guarantee that the last customer has exactly the same offer as the first one. Again, when you look down through here, the food container piece, this is still manually tracked in-house. Most of these other weights, the container weights that you see in here, these are coming directly back from the haulers in terms of what was generated during this particular show. This is where we're going. And I think it ties a little bit into what Food was talking about relative to, we have installed a food grinding system. In this case, this is a Grind Energy. I don't have stock in the company. I don't have an interest in, a financial interest in them. They simply have a system that we've put in place that works effectively in terms of, we take organic compostable waste, and rather than have it hauled away to a composter, it's actually ground up in a slurry, and then we have it hauled currently over to a digester, an anaerobic digester, and it's then combined with solid waste from a wastewater treatment plant, and it's used to generate methane gas and biofertilizer. So that provides this internal report for us that tells us how much was basically processed, and some other data relative to like how much time was spent doing it, total runtime. You can see the report up there in terms of what's out there for information that's available. They also give you the capability of generating a report for that same category that really basically lets you know what the impact was, that you can share with your clients, your customers. It's a pretty slick looking report that I think helps tell what your story is. I think the other piece here is just relative to how you maximize what your compostable waste is currently we're still paying, because the plant that we put in, the processor that we put in went in May of this last year, and we don't have even a full year of data yet in terms of how much quantity is generated, but we're really excited about the idea that as we look at who else we can partner with to give us their waste, essentially, how much we can generate, and see if we can't get to a point where when you add this slurry into those anaerobic digesters, it boosts the amount of methane that's produced. So this really is a plus to the digester, and we think that there's an opportunity here to change the model so that you get paid for that, as you used to with folks that were feeding pigs. It wasn't a whole lot of money, but it's better than having to pay to have your product hauled away. And the idea that folks start to get paid for compost, I think, is something that would absolutely accelerate the rate at which, two things. One, accelerate the rate at which people participate, but also help for those states that are trying to put in energy, changing how they're using fossil fuels overall as a state, as Illinois is, so that they can look not only at wind power, solar power, but they could also look at bio as an option. That's what I have. Any questions?
All right. Thank you. Andre, did I hear you in there?
But we probably have time for maybe one question.
Okay. Great. One question is regarding the colors chosen for each of the waste streams. Blue is for, in many parts of the country, blue is for recycling, green for composting, and red is for hazardous waste. Any particular way that you were able to determine the colors for your program?
Yeah, a lot of that had to do initially with the colors of bags that were selected in 2012. We don't have a lot of hazardous waste, so that generally speaking, we try to use a black bag here. And the colors on the cans themselves currently for the signage is a bit arbitrary. It has to do a little bit with what we found in the market in terms of the most effective bags that fit the criteria for compostability specifically and didn't have a negative impact relative to the recycling portions.
Okay, thank you. Andre, who's our next speaker?
Yes, that was great, Douglas. Thanks for that presentation. And if there's any time at the end, we'll take additional questions on your presentation. For now, next is Gina Sears of Winnow, which joined the Food Recovery Challenge as an endorser last year.
Thanks, Andre. I'll share my screen here real quick. Hopefully it's pulling up here. Okay. All right, so as Andre mentioned, my name is Gina Sears. I am the Business Development Executive and AI Advisor for Winnow in North America. So Winnow started in 2013 out of London, and since then we've grown to about 5 other offices across the globe, and our most recent being here in Iowa City, Iowa. And our team here looks over all of the North America region. So what Winnow has done for the past 6, almost 7 years now is just measure food waste. And we are really focused on identifying the opportunity cost of that food waste for our commercial kitchens. So we can look at it from 2 sides here. We can look at it from the food purchasing costs. So inevitably, a percentage of that direct food cost is going to end up in the bin from what we throw away. But we can also look at it from the food sales side as well. So a chunk of profit will be lost as well, not only because of the direct food costs that we're wasting, but also all those indirect costs that go into it, right? So we have those labor costs because we are paying for the kitchen staff to prepare the food that we've purchased. We're also paying for energy and resources in the kitchens to prepare or store the food that we've bought. And then, of course, once the food is wasted, we're paying to have it hauled away as well. So we can kind of look at it from both sides here. And so where does that cost actually come from here? What does that actually look like? So this is data that we've gathered from over 1,000 of our kitchen customers worldwide. And what we found typically is that food waste can cost anywhere from 4 to 13% of the kitchen's overall food spend for the year. So that's quite a big range. So let's look into where that food waste or where those food costs actually come from. So the biggest opportunity for Winnow and where we work best is in those prepared in advance offerings, if you look at the left column here. And the easiest way to describe that is buffet style offerings. So again, anything where there's a large volume of food being prepared ahead of time for the customers is what we focus on. We really focus on the pre-consumer waste or the overproduction. So anything that has gone out to the buffet that we produced, but that ends up coming back to the kitchen to get wasted because the meal period ended and the customers didn't end up taking that extra food. Of course, there's also a percentage of spoilage waste from inventory that goes into that, as well as prep loss, so from trimmings, bones, peels, anything like that. If we look over to the cook-to-order side, the majority of that waste that they're going to have is called plate waste or post-consumer waste. And there's a reason that we focus mainly on the overproduction piece in prepared in advance. Well, one reason is that it's a lot easier to focus in the kitchen on production planning behavior with the staff and changing that culture, as opposed to having our customers tell their customers, you know, not to leave food on their plate and not to take too much food and not to waste food. So that's one of the reasons we focus on the buffet style offerings. Another is that the overproduction, that pre-consumer waste, has a much higher value than plate waste. So although, you know, we've overproduced this food and it ended up being left over at the end of a service, it was still perfectly good food. There was nothing wrong with it. Perhaps we can reuse it in another offering. Maybe we'll put it in a broth tomorrow. But with plate waste, there's not much you can do with it. So there's a much lower value because it's already been on the customer's plate. It's been contaminated. We just have to throw it away. So we tend to, again, to focus on that overproduction piece. So the impact that Winnow has within the first year, again, this is from over 1,000 of our sites so far. We start off here in the reduction curve at 100% food waste, and this comes from our baseline test. So right when we install in a kitchen, we are just using the Winnow Vision system to measure the food waste for about a week or two. And we normalize this data over the year so that, again, we can just identify what the current waste value is in that kitchen. And then shortly after that, we work into these reduction phases here. So the first phase, over the first couple months of using Winnow, is really about identifying those low-hanging fruit and those quick wins. So really that's about just looking at the data from yesterday, for instance, and saying, okay, looks like during breakfast we wasted a lot of scrambled eggs. What can we do quickly today to make sure we're not overproducing scrambled eggs during breakfast again? Then more toward the middle of the year, over the next few months, we are looking into identifying further efficiency gains. And this really comes from identifying trends week to week, really digging into the details of the reports that we're getting from the waste, and really focusing on those high cost items that are being wasted. So a site may have a lot of, say, fried rice that they're throwing away every week, but that's not a very high cost item. We really want to focus on things like proteins, chicken, fish, pork. Those are the high value items that are really going to make a difference to our customers if their focus is on reducing their food costs. And then the third phase, toward the end of that first year, really goes into maintaining those long-term reductions that we've already recognized. And this is where the actual food cost savings come from. So our customers are able to actually purchase less food that would have otherwise been wasted. Because if you think about it, we are doing better with production, so we're producing less food, which means we're wasting less food, so we can then buy less food and save food cost savings that way. Typically, our customers will cut their food waste in half within the first year, and this translates usually to anywhere between 2 to 8% of their food costs that we're saving. So this is what the Winnow Vision system actually looks like. So this is a monitor with a touchscreen tablet that is mounted on the wall directly above the existing food waste bin in the kitchen. And we have a digitally connected scale that sits beneath the bin so that we can capture the weight of the food waste as well. And so if you look beneath the monitor here, we have this motion-sensitive camera that looks down into the food waste. And I'll show you how that looks in this video here. So the video is a bit stylized, but it'll give you an idea of kind of what the food waste process is with the artificial intelligence within the system. So you can see down below, we still have the scale. We're capturing the weight of all the food waste that's going in. And now you can imagine that the staff is bringing back these large pans of leftover food from the buffet. They're scraping each item in. The system is capturing the weight of the item, but the camera is also taking these before and after pictures. So it's essentially identifying the new food waste item, looking at it and saying, okay, this looks like French fries. With this next item, we can differentiate that these are not regular French fries, but they're sweet potato fries, again, just by looking at the pictures. We can differentiate between different kinds of bread rolls, different kinds of meatballs, etc. And this is all happening in real time, very accurately. It's all happening within about half a second or less of dumping the food waste into the bin. So if we move on, just to kind of break down a quick example here, you can see in the first row, it looks like we've thrown away kind of a cod fillet here, maybe some French fries, maybe some tartar sauce. Again, the system is just detecting that new item, separating it from the background, and saying, hey, this looks a lot like the fish and chips menu item from that site's menu. And this has, we threw away a pound of it, and that has a value of $2.50 that we just wasted. So going into another real-life example from one of our kitchens that we actually took this week, you can see looking in the bin here, we've got kind of this round, yellowish item that's really difficult to tell exactly what it is. Could be English muffins or squash or something like that. Thankfully, the system is more accurate than humans are at detecting food waste based on the pictures. So the system is about 87% confident that this is an omelet, which is in fact what that is. So the staff has a couple of options here. They can simply select the omelet and confirm that that was the correct item. Say we got it wrong, say it was scrambled eggs, they can always tap that second item there. Or if we got it wrong completely, maybe it was a very new menu item that the system hasn't seen before, they can always go into select from full menu and identify what that food was. If we get into a bit of an easier example, once this picture shows up here, so we can see there's something kind of green and round thrown in. Hopefully everyone can identify that that is green peas there. The system would agree, so we can see that with over 99% confidence, the system guesses that that was frozen peas. Normally in an example like this, anywhere or anything over 95% confident in that top one item, we won't even show the screen to the staff. So they virtually do not have to interact with the system at all once we're at this fully automated point with these menu items. The system will simply take the picture, it recognizes that it's frozen peas, and it will categorize it automatically. So the second piece of the Winnow Vision system and the program here is really all about the analytics. And again, just providing the data to the site so that they can choose which items or which meal periods they want to focus on. We send out these daily reports every morning to the chefs. We have weekly reports as well. And this is just the first page, but it really gives a good snapshot of kind of what's going on. So we can see the total weight and the total value of all of the food waste yesterday, as well as the environmental impact. We can break it down even further by time of day. So we can look and see that this site looks like they had the most wasted period was breakfast. If we look to the left a little bit, we can confirm that yes, breakfast was the most wasteful period in terms of meal period. And then we can break it down even further and look at the top items by weight that we wasted. So it looks like this site can look at this report and say, yesterday we wasted a lot of salmon and a lot of steak. What can we do today to make sure that that doesn't happen again? Also for our larger accounts where we have multiple sites that use Winnow within that one company, we offer cross-site reporting as well. So again, they can just compare, say, two hotels and say, Hotel A is doing really well with reducing their breakfast waste, while Hotel B looks like they're struggling quite a bit with breakfast. What best practices can we use from Hotel A that we can apply to Hotel B so that everyone is on the same page and is just learning from each other in terms of reducing their waste? And of course, all of this data, we don't just provide it via email, but we allow them to log into our online dashboard so that they can really visualize the data and customize it how they want. So they may just want to look at 3 different sites and they want to focus on one item. Maybe they just want to focus on omelets. So they're able to do that with our online dashboard, and it really just helps the accounts kind of benchmark performance between each of the sites. Finally, kitchens that are using Winnow are saving about $36 million a year in reduced food costs due to preventing food waste. Now with our most recent system, which is the Winnow Vision system you saw here today, we're on track to save over $1 billion per year by 2025. So we're really proud of all the work we've done with all of the brands you see below, as well as many more. And thank you again to the EPA for providing me this opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the audience.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for just one question. A lot of the questions that have come in throughout the session have asked about the opportunity and possibility of using these systems for food donation. Would the system also work to quantify the amount of food donated?
Absolutely. Yes. So it's very easy to navigate on the system and to switch bins on the scale. Say that, we're using a very large composting route for our typical food waste that we're throwing away to get composted. We can always switch that bin out and say put a tub or something like that, whatever you're using for donations on the scale. We can select that all of this food is going to donations so that they can really keep track of how much is going out. You really can track any kind of food waste. So anything that is being overproduced, anything that's getting donated, anything that's going to compost, anything that's maybe getting reworked to a different dish on another day. It's really easy to navigate through the system and yes, certainly select what is being donated as opposed to being wasted.
Okay, great. Thank you. And with that, Andre, on to our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Gina. We will now culminate with Laura Smith, contractor for Boulder Valley School District, which has been a Food Recovery Challenge endorser since 2017. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Pull up my presentation here. Alrighty, so we are good to go. So hello everybody, I'm Laura Smith from Boulder Valley School District, and you've heard about a few different waste tracking systems, and I'm going to take that a little bit further and talk about the system that we use, LeanPath, and the actual implementation of it, what it looks like in reality for us as a school district. So with that, a little bit of history about, or backstory about BVSD. So I'm with the Food Services Department. We serve 52 schools and 31,000 students. For us, that means about 14,000 meals a day. We are a scratch-cooked operation, so we are really making everything from ingredient. That means raw chicken in many cases. That means local produce from our area farmers. That means a variety of bread products. So scratch cooking definitely comes into play when we talk about food waste in BVSD. We have salad bars in every school, and we currently work out of 3 production kitchens. So each of these regional kitchens cooks food for 14 to 17 sites. However, starting next school year, the food will all come out of one centralized kitchen, and we'll still maintain the scratch cooking there, but it will be a larger bulk process with like 200-gallon sous vide tanks, and so of course that will also affect our food waste in the future, and hopefully at some point the EPA would invite me back to talk about that. But for the time being, this is the model that I am referring to when I talk about our food waste in schools. So for us, that means 2 sources of food waste: pre-consumer, what's happening in our regional production kitchens, and what's happening in our satellite kitchens. Those are our school-based sites where the food is finished cooking and actually served to students. And then of course we have our post-consumer waste. And so we are actually looking at data from LeanPath for both of these food waste sources, and so I will dive a little bit deeper into both of those. So traditionally in K-12 food waste, we are talking about composting as kind of the most cutting edge process. A lot of schools don't even have composting, but we're lucky enough in Boulder to work with a zero waste hauler called EcoCycle. They have a robust program where they're not only bringing composting into our schools, but they're educating students about what that means. Students get to go out to farms to see what happens with compost, how it's used in soil health, how it's used for animal scraps, and so forth. And some newer ideas in K-12 food waste are, as others have alluded to, donating extra food to food banks or soup kitchens and shelters. As I said, feeding animals, so that was one thing that we tried a few years ago, but people got a little too excited about feeding the piggies. So we actually don't do that anymore, but it definitely is a model that works for some other schools. And then industrial uses, so for example, we take a lot of our used oil and we send it with a local company to be transformed into biofuel. So there's some different applications depending on the resources in your area where industrial uses can come into play. But as everybody keeps referring to, source reduction is kind of the name of the game. We need to be reducing the volume of surplus food generated, and you can't manage what you don't measure. So for us, it's going from tracking to awareness to action, and that's all in the name of prevention. So on the pre-consumer waste side, a lot of this is information that I'm sure most people know, but 4 to 10% of food that's purchased is thrown out before even reaching the plate. That comes from overproduction, spoilage, expiration, trimmings. Sometimes that comes down to a lack of training of staff and knowledge about what they could do to help with all of those processes. For a service that's as large as ours that covers 500 square miles, has a staff of 200, that's also a lot of cats to herd. And so making sure that everybody has the same sort of ideas about what food waste reduction looks like is absolutely important to our operation. So this slide is from Lean Path, but it encompasses a lot of kind of our thought process within BVSD Food Services. So reasons for pre-consumer food waste in a K-12 food service operation. As I said, overpurchasing and padding is definitely one of those high contributors. We need to make sure that we have food for every kid every day. And if we don't have enough food on hand, and there's that last kindergartner at the end of the line who still needs food, we cannot be caught without. So overpurchasing definitely happens within K-12 schools. I'm sure it happens within a lot of food service facilities, but I think especially public schools, K-12 schools, that's certainly an issue. We can't say that we've just run out of something. So we try to maintain a policy within our department of not ordering more than 5% of what your projected need is. But of course, on any given day, there could be a field trip or something. So that's definitely a contributor. Food safety, we're working with high-risk populations, and so if there's any question, we generally need to dispose of an item. So if there's any question about an expiration or a handling, temperature check, any signs of packages being opened or mold, whatever, we need to dispose of that item, and that can add up. Again, we're creating 14,000 meals a day, so that can definitely generate a significant amount of pre-consumer waste. Trim waste, we are working with 10 local farmers, and so we're bringing in raw carrots, we're bringing in raw bell peppers, and there's definitely some waste that is necessary with those. We're not going to be serving the core of an apple necessarily if we are making an apple ginger crumble, for example. But at the same time, we can be a little bit smarter about how much trim is being created. So instead of taking off a 1/4 inch of a carrot, we can take off an 1/8 of an inch of a carrot. But we are producing salad bar items every week, twice a week, in order to make sure that we have fresh available on all of our salad bars. And so that trim waste definitely adds up depending on which items we are serving that week. Overproduction, similar to the overpurchasing and padding, we are definitely one of the contributors of overproduction in the food waste world. We are working in bulk recipes, and sometimes exploding those out isn't quite accurate the first go round. There's all sorts of reasons why overproduction might become an issue for us. And then customer experience and choice. When it comes to post-consumer waste, which I'll get into in a little bit, our first plan of action is to make sure that kids like the food that we're serving. But that kind of comes back to pre-consumer, and if the first time that we are serving a recipe, we are sure that kids are going to like it and they don't end up doing so, then the next go around we might be creating too much. They might be choosing another item that we thought was going to be less popular and it's more popular. So it's all a balancing act for us. But in K-12, there's a lot of reasons for pre-consumer waste. So we have the Lean Path 360 food services tracker in our 3 production kitchens. And much like some of the other companies, it is a large scale that's attached to a tablet, and a compost bin just sits on each of these scales in our kitchens. For us, that is the only compost bin that exists within these kitchens to try and encourage tracking. And the way that the Lean Path system works is somebody puts something in one of the bins, the system recognizes that there's new weight on the scale, and the tablet pops up with a series of questions. So we are able to track by employee. They just enter their initials and the system already has them in there. It then pops up with a series of food categories, and those are dictated by an individual operation. And so we've whittled it down to about 20, 25 items so that people aren't having to scroll through pages and pages of options, but yet we're getting a little bit more information about what item is being thrown away. Then each employee is asked about the waste reason. Again, we provide all of those options, so an entire transaction really takes an employee about 5 seconds. But we are gathering a significant amount of information from each transaction, and then we are able to do some action related to that. So our employees, as soon as they enter all of the information, receive some immediate feedback of what the item's value was, and that's an estimate based on our purchasing records. It tells how many reports an individual employee has made, what their rank is amongst all of their coworkers, and then it equates to some environmental impact. So if you say that you've lost 5 pounds of food, that may not mean a whole lot to some people, but equating it to bathtubs of water, gallons of oil, cars on the road, trees cut down, so forth and so on, can actually impact an employee. So that immediate feedback is really important in our minds, and for that reason we're encouraging our employees to track regularly and to track every single item that they are getting rid of. Then, much like other systems, we have a really robust online reporting system, so all of our information from every site that has a lean path is aggregated to a cloud-based system. So I can access it from where I am, our food services director can access it, our head chef can access it, purchasing, so forth and so on. Everybody can access it for their different job roles, and for our employees, that means that they can also look at what trends are occurring within their kitchens and ways that we can start looking at training or conversations to be had. On the purchasing side, maybe we want to be purchasing a different kind of celery, whether that means something that's already pre-processed for us or just with the tops cut off, anything that we can kind of do to reduce our waste, we're getting the information for how to address that. And we're also able to set some goals within the Lean Path system. This has become a really important process for us. So within each kitchen, they're able to set a goal based on their existing standards, and then they get regular updates about how progress is being made and ultimately what the end goal is and whether they've met that projection. This also creates an opportunity for friendly challenges between kitchens, and we've had a lot of success reducing our waste. Vegetable trim waste has been key for us, as well as breaded products. We do our own breading in-house for like chicken strips, and so we've really been able to make some impact there. So some opportunities for change. I won't dive into this too much because I think I've referred to a lot of them, but training has been really key for us, making sure that people have the knife skills class that they need, that they have the recognition and understanding of the importance and the role that they play in food waste reduction, and of course implementing safe reuse as necessary. So maybe that's not throwing away the ends of the broccoli. Stems may not taste great on a salad, but they're going to be really good in a cheesy potato bake. So lots of different options, lots of opportunities for change based on that data feedback. So again, just a couple of pictures. This is one of our breading systems, so you can see how much breading might be created if you multiply that by 14,000 meals. And then on the flip side, we have Lean Path in our schools. So talked about the production. The next step of our operation is the school satellite kitchens, and finally the school cafeterias. So in the satellite kitchen, it's a very similar setup. They have the exact same tracking system, except for at that point we're asking people to track not only what waste is produced during the prep, but what waste is produced post-service. So they're able to take all of the salad bar items on a Friday afternoon before a break, like will happen tomorrow, and see how much waste was left and make projections for the future breaks based on that waste. So it's really providing that feedback so that management can happen. Again, similar reports. I'm going to keep moving on this so that we have some extra time for questions. But on the front end in our schools, we're seeing a lot of overproduction. Again, we need to make sure we have food for all kiddos, but we don't want to have too much, and so that's definitely a management issue within our arena. And food waste trends, we get all of these lovely reports. They're by school, they're aggregated, they're by grade level, lots of opportunities for us. And again, we can look at goals, set goals within a school building or across the district. And then we come to our third system that we have implemented, which is the Lean Path Spark in school cafeterias. So the same system with a large compost bin that sits on top of a scale attached to a tablet, but then there's an additional food waste screen that's attached. So it's just a TV screen with an extra little box that basically translates the information in real time and projects an image for students to relate to. So they'll throw a piece of bread away and immediately it will aggregate into this screen and equate it to truckloads of waste going into a landfill or what have you. So we're not asking kids to put in their names. We're not asking kids to record the type of information tossed out, or excuse me, type of waste tossed out, but they're getting the aggregated information. And it's really fun. They love looking at screens, rightly or wrongly, but they definitely pay attention to these screens in their school cafeterias, and it's a passive communication system within our buildings. So here are some pictures of the real-time display. And we had one school that after posting the screen and the system for 3 months, it was either 3 or 4 months, saw a 30% reduction just because of the passive communication. So kids really are paying attention. We get similar reports from those schools about the changes in waste, and again, it's by school building or we can aggregate it. We're also getting information about waste by the day of the week, so we can reflect back on the menus served and make changes as necessary there to make sure that we're serving the meals that kids want. One question that we always get is about how a K-12 school district is paying for Lean Path, and my answer is grants. So we have received 5 grants now in order to purchase these systems, and it's amazing how many people want to support this work. I would encourage any school district who's considering going this direction to at least start the conversation. We've had a lot of success with it. It's provided some invaluable information to us, and we aren't stopping here. We currently have 11 systems. We have 4 more on the way, but our ultimate goal is to have one in all 52 of our sites. So with that, I will take any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. We had one question about speakers' contact information. That is available on the slides, I believe, in the handout section. Also, those will be posted later on, probably after the holidays, on our SMM webinar webpage. One quick question before we turn it back over to Andre. Any particular reason why you stopped the animal feeding operations with the pigs?
We loved the idea, but people in our kitchens were getting too excited about the idea of feeding pigs, and so we were actually seeing more waste because of that. We would hope that people recognize the value of food for people first, but basically we were being too generous to the piggies, and so we needed to cut that program.
Okay, very interesting. So with that, I will back over to Andre.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Laura. And we thank all of our speakers, Max, Jay, Douglas, Gina, and Laura, for sharing their 21st century methods for measuring excess food, ranging from pen and paper to artificial technology. And as Chris mentioned, we will be planning to post the recorded webinar audio and slides in January to epa.gov/SMM. Sign up for the next EPA Sustainable Materials Management webinar, January 23rd, 2020, entitled Safe Packaging and Transportation of Lithium Batteries, What You Need to Know, at epa.gov/SMM. This concludes today's session. Goodbye.